Hey guys, Jake here, and today I will talk about a space of racing games that you see mentioned every now and then, but you don't really see talked about a lot, and that is mobile racing games. I myself, when I was growing up, have actually played a lot of mobile racing games, and I'd say in mobile gaming, there used to be a lot of good ones. I'd say around 2014 and after, the mobile game landscape kind of changed a bit. And obviously, there were microtransactions and things around like that kind of spreading up before. I think it probably started 2012-ish. Probably that's when microtransactions started. 2013, 2014, they started to get bigger. And I'd say after around that time, they just got unbearable. Now mobile games are seen mostly as some kind of joke to people who actually really like video games. Most of them are riddled with nickel and diming microtransactions and are designed to be very addictive to try to get you to spend more and more on it. And I myself view that as a huge shame, as I think smartphones actually have a ton of potential. GPUs in smartphones have been more powerful than the ones in laptops for like 6 to 8 years now. The technology has been so much faster than your average laptop. Like the gaming performance you'll get out of a $400 phone is going to be much greater than what you get out of a $400 laptop. And that is obviously due to Intel's part, not really being good at making integrated GPUs. But no matter whoever's fault it is, mobile phones have really great graphics processors, and you see that in modern mobile games. But the platform has so much lost potential due to how its business is run. We could have full-featured console ports that work perfectly like your regular game, or even mobile design games that just look and play great that we could buy for $5 or $10 once and not be nickel and dime for every other thing in the game and have ads everywhere. But we all know how that went. But I think smartphones were really missed potential in terms of gaming. And in fact, I think if smartphones actually had proper games and a proper business model to them, more on their app stores than, microtransactions and nickel and diming, I don't know if the Nintendo Switch would even exist. Obviously, it still could, because smartphone controls just aren't as good as the Nintendo Switch's Joy-Cons or ability to use controllers. But smartphones would not be taken as such of a joke to people who actually like gaming if the business around mobile gaming wasn't so bad. And I think probably most people have completely disregarded mobile racing games as something that can even be good as of late. Most of what you see with mobile racing games is about Asphalt 9 or CSR2's terrible microtransactions but great graphics. But worry no more, because in this video, I want to talk about my favorite mobile racing games from back in the day and some of the great stuff you can actually find now. So like I said before, I think mobile gaming actually used to have a lot of great stuff, and that was outside of racing games too. One of my favorite games I'd say ever, and probably the best mobile game of all time in my opinion, is Monument Valley. It has an amazing art style, really good puzzles, and if you were to say the words mobile exclusive, this is a serious mobile exclusive. It's really that good. But there used to be a lot of these back in the day. And some of the franchises from back in the day still exist now, such as Real Racing and Asphalt. But I really used to enjoy them back then, back in the iPod Touch days, the iPhone 4, 4S days. And I want to start off with Real Racing 2. Now yes, there's Real Racing 3 now. That game has better graphics, probably better handling, still has good progression, but Real Racing 2 was a lot of fun for me back in the day. And that game was just, a simple one-time purchase, had no other bullshit in it, and it had a really good career progression and a pretty good amount of cars for the time. Even the graphics for a 2010 mobile game are really impressive. I mean, it's almost kind of a mix between a PS2 and an Xbox 360 era game. It's kind of in the middle between those. And that was for, 2010, for being on a little tiny iPod Touch that has probably not even a quarter of the graphics processing power we have today on mobile phones. It's pretty crazy to think. The game doesn't have a huge car list, but it's pretty extensive for what it is. The career mode is one you would expect out of, modern console games. It's actually better than what some modern console games have. The controls feel really smooth to this day on a mobile device, and honestly, I wish this game was still up on the App Store, because it's one of those that I would recommend today, but unfortunately it's not available. Maybe if you're on Android you can possibly find an APK file for it. But in this video, is it really that worth it to talk about games that aren't available anymore? Well, in general I do want to talk about some of my favorites, whether they're not available anymore or not, but I do want to mention plenty of games that are available today. And this one is going to be a very different game. You've probably never heard of it before. It's not a track racer, it's not an open world racer, it's not a street racer, not a drag racer, whatever. It's actually kind of a platformer, and it's called Car Stunts. It's one of my favorite mobile games ever, and it's one that I've actually replayed multiple times. It's almost a mix between a racing game and a puzzle game. It's kind of a platformer. Here's how it works. Everyone knows that racing games on mobile use tilt controls, and they were almost kind of a gimmick back in the day. You always saw them in ads for the iPod Touch and stuff like that. People don't like them as much nowadays as they used to, but this game takes tilt controls and designs its entire game around it, and therefore, it's actually super fun to play. And you don't just tilt your phone left and right to steer, you have to actually tilt it up and down through the air to, not hit stuff and land on a track correctly and stuff like that. The game is also available on Steam, but I personally wouldn't recommend playing it with a controller. It's obviously designed for a mobile phone, and it works much better with that. But it is still available. And it actually has a sequel, Car Stunts 2, which is also a really good game, has more types of cars, and has a level designer very similar to Forza Horizon 4, where you just drive to make your own track. But overall, the Car Stunts games have multiple game mode types, a really fun physics engine, and the second one has a level designer, and you guys know I really like that kind of stuff. But this one might just be my most favorite, at least unique, mobile racing game ever. Next is something a little bit more familiar, and many of you guys have probably heard this one, is Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 for mobile. Now, actually, this is a bit of an interesting one. I didn't get into this game as much as I did Hot Pursuit or Undercover on mobile. Hot Pursuit on mobile was a lot of fun, but now if I go back to it, it feels like it got a lot more dated than Most Wanted 2012 did. And Undercover had a pretty good career mode and a lot of customization, but I sadly can't record it anymore due to it not being supported on newer iOS versions. The game features the same soundtrack as Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012, a kind of similar looking map, but it is on closed tracks versus being on an open world like the console version. And the bosses work quite differently. They actually have names and customized cars, unlike the weird all-white cars from the console version. The big downside of Most Wanted 2012 on mobile, I think, is that it doesn't have many control scheme options. You basically can only use the little steering wheel on the left of the screen. You can't even move where it is. Or you have to use tilt controls. I prefer to use touch controls where you just touch the left and right of the screen, but this game doesn't offer that. So if you like to use those controls, that might be a deal breaker for you. But the mobile version of Most Wanted 2012 is quite a fun and good mobile Need for Speed game. And I would probably call it better than No Limits just due to the game actually being, not No Limits and, all the things that game does, if you know what I mean. However, if you've noticed, all these games are kind of old. The newest game that I've actually mentioned here is Car Stunts 2, being from 2013. So, what's the whole situation with newer mobile racing games? I have to admit, kind of a guilty pleasure, Asphalt 8 is actually one of my most remembered racing games from 2010s. I actually played it a lot. And as well as 8, I also played Asphalt 5 and 7 quite a lot too. However, Asphalt 8 is the one that blew up and the one that also changed mobile racing games quite a lot. You see, Asphalt 8, I think it has fantastic gameplay. It has really fun mechanics. The tracks are great. It has so many different cars to choose from. But the game went from being a simple one-time purchase to being free to play, to start charging cars for like $50 a car, to start locking a lot of new things behind events, to start having 2 different upgrade systems, and then I think even 3 upgrade systems. And the game just started becoming so complex, when I think what you want on a mobile device is actually the opposite of that. Asphalt 8 not only started to try nickel and diming, but it also got more complex with how the upgrade systems work, with how many currencies there are. I think it just got absolutely ridiculous. And it's a game that I sometimes try to revisit, but I just don't want to get into because it's just so complex. And I feel like there's all these pro players that are playing it, and you can't really catch up to anyone. But that might not even be the worst part about it. You pretty much get less than a quarter of the credits you used to get per race, unless you watch an ad after every single race you play. It's almost like they completely forgot that the game was paid in the first place. Now, I'm not complaining that, oh my god, all my money's wasted now. But more so that the free-to-play went so popular that the game changed this much because of it. But where Asphalt 8 went downhill is actually only one half of the story. And I'm pretty sure you guys know what I'm going to talk about here. It all started with the original CSR Racing that came out, I believe, in 2012? Yep, June 28, 2012. And just like Asphalt 8, I actually really liked CSR Racing 1. It was fun, it had a good car list, I liked the progression with the crews and stuff like that, In fact, a lot of these old mobile racing games actually have really good career modes that are better than a lot of the career modes we get on the console and PC games as of late. Now, how did CSR Racing change the mobile game landscape in terms of racing games? It was two things this game did. It's a drag racer. It has short races. It works really well on the mobile device because you can simply get in and out of playing it. And in fact, that made this game become so popular that there are so many clones of it on the App Store now. And two, which perfectly goes in line with the system, fuel. Everyone knows what I'm talking about here if you've ever played a modern mobile racing game in your life. That is the system when after you play a race, one little point is taken off the top of the game, and if you play enough of the game, you can't play it after a while, so you have to wait a few minutes or an hour or whatever to fuel up your tank again and wait to play, basically. And these two things, being short races and fuel systems, pretty much went on to plague every single mobile racing game afterwards. Even games that aren't drag racing based, like Need for Speed No Limits, adopt the fuel system and extremely short races, and it's not even the fuel system that kills Need for Speed No Limits. I think it's just the short races that kills it, but CSR Racing is the one that popularized it. And these systems that I talk about that I don't like have pretty much gone to plague every mobile racing game, even when there are other great things about them. Like Need for Speed No Limits, great customization system. They've got tributes to old Need for Speed games and these cool events. All these really cool body kits that the newer games don't get on consoles, but the game's races are just so horrendously short. It just makes it unenjoyable in my opinion. And then that just accompanied with the whole fuel crap, I don't like No Limits. So, in a sea of microtransaction infested, advertisement ridden, with pretty much no end in sight because these games make so much money, there has to be something good, right? Well, it's actually a game that wasn't meant for mobile at all. Grid Autosport. You may know it as an Xbox 360 and PS3 title, but it's a game that almost got kind of forgotten because it was released on what was last-gen systems a year after the new systems released. New meaning PS4 and Xbox One back in 2014. And the game was generally meant as a fix-up to Grid 2, which I didn't think Grid 2 was really a bad game, but I understand why people wouldn't like it, so I understand the existence of it. But in general, it was a game that I think was very much forgotten. But the game has recently been revived with a new mobile and Switch port that have released in the past couple of years, and that are actually still getting updates by Furrow Interactive. This actually isn't ported over by Codemasters. They go over to another studio named Furrow Interactive to actually port over the games to mobile and Nintendo Switch. And Grid Autosport's mobile port is extremely impressive. It is the full entire console experience with even some features that I don't see on the PC version, and it even runs at 60 frames per second on a $400 iPhone. I played quite a bit of it last night and I was just so impressed. I've had this game for a little bit about a year, but on my old phone it only ran at 30 FPS and I didn't like how smooth it felt, so I didn't really play it. But now on my new phone, at only $400, it runs at 60 frames a second. Think about it. There is this full chuck console PC racing game, Grid. The system it originally released for, Xbox 360 and PS3, didn't even run 60 FPS on those systems, but it runs it on your new mobile phone. Yes, the graphics aren't going to be as good when you run it in the performance mode, but the fact that it is this smooth is just astounding. And it features the same career mode, same cars, all the content from the PC and console versions. And in fact, you can download the HD textures and all the DLC for free right at the start of the game. And if you don't want to download it, you can just do it anytime later in the settings app. And even though the game was designed for analog controls with a controller, the game translates to auto acceleration and left and right screen tapping extremely well. Now, obviously that's going to be a lot less fidelity than the game was designed for in the beginning, so there's a couple times where it feels a bit unpredictable, but for the most part, it actually feels really, really good. And this game is a one purchase, no bullshit. You just buy it one time. It's a $10 purchase, at least it was $10 when I bought it. I don't know about now, but it was $10 when I bought it. And that is an entire game that was $60 in 2014, running all on your mobile phone. It is truly the best and most positive definition of a console PC port to mobile. And if you aren't really interested in trying it on mobile, if you don't like mobile controls, the game's also available on Nintendo Switch with better graphics. However, I did hear that the performance mode, 60 FPS, is a little bit unstable, so you might want to look out for that. But on mobile, the 60 FPS on my iPhone SE 2020 has been so stable. The best modern mobile racing game is by far Grid Autosport. It may not look as fancy as CSR2, but the gameplay is so much more, and you get a lot more for your money in my opinion. So, in general, I recommend these 4 games if you want a great on-the-go mobile racing game experience. And most of these that I recommend, you can still get today. The only exception being Real Racing 2. But if you're on Android, you could possibly find APK for it, like I mentioned before. So, that's it for now, guys. As someone who grew up with a lot of mobile games, as someone who was born in the year 2000, I was exposed to the iPod Touch era and early mobile game era. So when I see people talk about in the modern day that, oh, mobile games are so crap, they should never be spoken of, I'm kind of like, that's kind of doing a disservice to some games in my opinion. A lot of the older games I think deserve some respect, and there are some gems in the modern day, like Grid Autosport. So, what is your guys' favorite mobile racing game? I want to hear your guys' thoughts in general, and I'll see you guys later.